My impression walking away from I/O was that Sundar Pichai is far more conservative in this regard in terms of pushing the envelope on AI than certainly either Sam Altman or Satya Nadella. What has he seen? What has he seen that's made him so cautious?
To your point earlier, Todd, about I don't know what Sundar has seen. It might just be that he's seen the Terminator trilogy.
Hi, I'm Boaz, founder and CEO of Simply Augmented, and I'm excited that you're tuning in to the Shift AI podcast, a show that explores what it takes to thrive and adapt to the changing workplace in the digital age of remote work and AI. In today's episode, I'm thrilled to have Todd Bishop and Adam Tratt as our guests. Todd is the co-founder of Geekwire, one of the key national technology news sites with deep roots in the Seattle area. Adam Tratt is a marketing consultant and a serial entrepreneur based in Seattle. If you're someone interested in the way that AI is contributing to the technology ecosystem in Seattle, you're not going to want to miss this episode. We also want to send out a special thank you to Simply Augmented for sponsoring this episode. This is going to be a great show, and we're super excited to talk to Todd and Adam today. We can't wait to learn more. Let's get to it. All right, Adam, Todd, welcome to the Shift AI podcast. Today is a special day. This is the first time that we've had two guests on the show, and I couldn't be more excited to have the two of you.
For sure.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Thanks for having us.
So today is going to be interesting because we're going to talk a little bit about AI in general, and you guys are going to talk about your future predictions. And so we're going to go back and look at this episode years later, and we're going to figure out if you guys were right or if you guys were wrong. But first, I want to introduce my guests today. Adam Tratt is an amazing entrepreneur in the Seattle area. Adam is the principal of Squirrelfish Marketing Consulting and is working with medium and large companies and helping with their marketing efforts. He's always been one of those people that has been really, really creative when it comes to marketing. And so today we're excited to talk to him. And we also have Todd Bishop. Todd is the co-founder of Geekwire. And Todd has been writing and thinking and researching a lot about AI over the last years and is going to have wonderful things to share with us today. So welcome, you guys. Really excited.
This is great. Thanks, Boaz.
Thanks for having me.
So I want to start. I always like to start the show by getting a little bit of background on the guest. So Adam, will you just talk a little bit about how you got to be the principal of Squirrelfish, a little bit of your background and work history?
Sure. My first job out of college was as a product manager at Microsoft. I helped launch what turned out to be Microsoft's first ever internet product, which was Internet Assistant for Microsoft Word. We'd take a Word doc and convert it into this new file format that nobody cared about at the time, called HTML. And then as the dot-com bubble started to grow, I left Microsoft. I went to an early e-commerce startup and then to a logistics startup called iShip.com. And then when the bubble burst, I left technology altogether and I joined a fledgling board game company called Cranium. And I was the first marketing guy on the team there. And I was there for 6 years. Cranium was acquired by Hasbro. And then eventually, after bouncing around a little bit, I joined Techstars. I was in the very first cohort in the Seattle Techstars program. And coming out of that, I built a company called Haiku Deck with my co-founder, Kevin Lenaway. And we worked on that for many years. I was there for 8 years, and we sold the company in 2018. And I went back to Microsoft real quickly for a brief stint at Minecraft. And then when COVID hit, I decided I'd strike out on my own. And so that's when I started helping clients do everything from branding to go-to-market strategies and some marketing execution. And my clients, a lot of them are educational technology companies. Some of them are consumer product companies and everything in between. I did a stint at YouTube, and I'm really happy to be here. I'm really happy to be living in the age of AI where I can use all these cool new tools to help me do a better job for my clients.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk to you more about that. Todd, will you give us a brief kind of rundown? What brought you to this point?
I will. I do want to point out that Adam forgot the part about the giant squid and Sir Mix-a-Lot, but that's a whole other story. I know. Okay.
Oh, I forgot about that. We're going to come back to that.
Good.
We're going to come back to that.
Longtime newspaper reporter since I was a teenager, got into tech reporting, moved to Seattle, met John Cook, started Geekwire, cover Microsoft, Amazon, and increasingly AI. And it's really an exciting time to be doing it. We like to say that what happens in Seattle matters everywhere. And I think at no other time has that been more true than it is now, given everything that's happening with the confluence of cloud and AI. So I'm excited to be here to talk about this.
Well, before we go into Sir Mix-a-Lot, I do want to stay with you for a second, Todd. And, that so much has happened in the last couple of years, and a lot of it has happened here in Seattle. I mean, we do benefit from having these two massive cloud providers, and, Microsoft in particular in their acquisition, if you want to call it that, of OpenAI. Can you talk a little bit about the trends and developments that you're seeing and the stuff that's happened in the last, year and a half that you're the most excited about?
We've seen the awakening over the past, year, I would say. And right now, I think people are trying to figure out what exactly to do with these tools. I think the capabilities and the weaknesses of the tools are becoming more and more apparent. And we're at the stage where a lot of startups and big tech companies are looking for real specific vertical applications to provide more value. I was talking with an entrepreneur a couple weeks ago who said he thinks that each of his engineers have gotten about 20% more productive over the past year to 18 months. And that feels about right to me. That's about where my experience is. And I think right now we're seeing a variety of companies in many different ways look for the incremental productivity beyond that, trying to get up to maybe 30, 40, 50%. That's my sense of things right now.
Do you think that's true, Adam, when you think about the way that it's affecting you and the work that you're doing and the tools that you're using? Maybe talk a little bit about the efficiencies that you're seeing and the tools.
Yeah, so right now, a lot of the work that I do is by myself. And one of the things about marketing is that there's so many different sub-disciplines within the category of marketing. And it's hard to be great at all of them. In fact, there's almost nobody that's great at all of them, because half of marketing is this analytical sort of digital spreadsheet exercise where you're trying to make every dollar that you spend work as hard as possible for your brand, whether it's usually in driving demand, right? And then there's another part that's a creative exercise, and that has a lot to do with how do you present your brand. Well, what are the words that you choose? What are the visuals that you choose? When you create it, it can be as minute as a social media post to as high level as a brand architecture. And so when you're, most marketing people identify on this spectrum of, from the spreadsheet part of marketing to the creative part of marketing. And regardless of where you fall on that spectrum, there's all these ways to use AI to help you compensate for whatever your weaknesses are. So whether it's running an efficient LinkedIn advertising campaign or creating tweets from a blog post, there's ways you can deploy LLMs and other tools to do a great job.
Yeah. The idea around use cases is an interesting one. And when I think about marketing and content creation, that makes perfect sense when you think about, all the things that you can do faster, better with a team of one. The other side on the use case, thinking about Copilot and GitHub and developers, I've been reading a lot about efficiencies. Now there's 40% is the number that I've been hearing, but it doesn't surprise me that 20% is probably kind of where we're landing. I wonder, as you guys are hearing about other use cases that make a lot of sense, are you hearing about customer service agents, outwardly facing conversational AI, internal conversational AI for HR and other kind of search, related activities? What else are you guys hearing out there around use cases that actually people are doing right now?
It feels to me, to Adam's point, that people are patching things together a lot right now. And people end up going back to ChatGPT or back to Claude and trying to create the solution themselves. And I actually think that we're starting to see some of these vertical applications come out, but I think that is where the real opportunity is, in targeting a specific industry niche and stitching something together that really fits with them. I've started to see this with a tool that I use called Otter AI, OTTER.ai, that combines transcription with a chat. And it's not targeted specifically to journalists, but it's kind of the go-to tool for a lot of journalists that I know. And to me, it seems like that's where the opportunity is in creating those more vertical applications.
Yeah. And Adam, you said earlier that you are going back to Copilot and using Bing as a kind of fallback default. So can you talk a little bit about that, like what that has been like to experiment with some of these other tools and what's working for you?
Yeah, and I mean, I'm probably a bit of an outlier in that I geek out on this stuff, and I'm out there actively searching for tools that are going to boost my productivity. A lot of the time, the same AI technologies that exist in these silos off to the side are being integrated into the tools that we use every day. So to Todd's point about Otter.ai, that is basically text or speech to text, right? And I recently had to do some thought leadership work for a brand that I work with. And the challenge was that the thought leadership was locked inside the brain of the leader of the company. And so the way I did it was I interviewed the CEO of the company to try and extract his story from his brain. And I recorded that using, it just so happened they were on Teams, so we used Microsoft Teams, but had it been a different client, we would have used Google Meet. And Microsoft Teams had voice to text transcription built in, same as Otter AI, but it was just already there. So I was able to take that transcript and then copy that into a document, then feed the document to an LLM. I can't remember if I used Claude for that project or not, but ultimately I used AI to extract topics from that hour and a half long conversation into 15 different blog posts and get drafts of those blog posts. And it still took a lot of time for me to edit the blog posts and make them sound right and sound like they were written by a human being. But it was something that would have taken significantly longer if I had to hand transcribe or hire someone to transcribe and then write the blog posts myself. There was a lot of sort of parsing and analysis that the LLMs were able to do that made this project a couple of days worth of work instead of a couple months worth of work.
Before we go further with the interview, I want to take a moment to tell you about one of our podcast sponsors, Augmented AI, and how they are transforming businesses with Gen AI solutions. Augmented AI specializes in helping organizations uncover and address internal workflow challenges that Gen AI can solve. Their comprehensive process starts by identifying and prioritizing business problems, and then assessing each based on value, effort, and risk. Once a problem is selected, the Augmented AI team tests and validates the solution to ensure that it works. Only after this thorough validation do they draft technical requirements, which serve as a blueprint for building and deploying the solutions. The real beauty of partnering with Augmented AI is that they don't just stop at strategy and feasibility studies. They actually stand up the solutions and manage them for you so you can focus on what you do best. If you're interested in experiencing this innovative approach to deploying Gen AI solutions, visit simplyaugmented.ai and click on the Learn More button. That's simplyaugmented.ai. Now back to the episode. It brings up another issue that I've been thinking a lot about, and I think both of you have an interesting perspective. Adam, you as the CEO of a startup, and Todd, someone that speaks to startup founders all the time. A lot of these things that I'm hearing out there, whether it is recording a meeting in summary like a Fathom or an Otter or a Read.ai or some of these other tools, I'm seeing the big companies move so much faster. And all of a sudden you wake up in the morning like we did 2 weeks ago with Sora and OpenAI, and then all of a sudden, all these small companies that were building text to video or building text to summary or meeting summary, they are now in a really, really awkward position to have to kind of prove their value. And so can you guys talk a little bit about that as we kind of like figure out like how we value these different smaller startups, especially in the Seattle ecosystem? What are you hearing out there?
It's funny you should bring up Sora. I just talked a couple weeks ago with Rahul Sood, who's the CEO of a company called Irreverent Labs, and they were building and are still building what OpenAI basically came out with in terms of Sora. And of course, it's in his interest to say that, yes, they just legitimized the market for us and all the standard things that you hear from startup founders. But to some extent, it tends to ring true in this case because you've got OpenAI and Microsoft, in this case, so tightly coupled that other companies, Sony or whoever else you might think of in terms of big companies are going to be looking for their own solutions. Microsoft's essentially got a bit of a lock on the infrastructure with OpenAI. And so even though obviously there's some partnerships with others and the ability to do commercial deals with each of them, if you're really going to do a tight strategic partnership with somebody, there are opportunities for startups if they can find the resources in terms of the GPUs. And that is the big challenge. So that really, the scarcity of the compute is, I think, the huge hurdle. And that's where Amazon Web Services can come in with its Bedrock tools and its platform. And so you see sort of this shuffling around of priorities and resources. And in the mix, I think you've got to have some really savvy startups and some really smart founders to navigate this whole world when you've got these giants who are moving as quickly as you mentioned they are.
You're right. I was just going to add on to that everybody that I know is surprised that Microsoft has come out so strong, so fast, and Google is still apparently flat-footed. I mean, I was trying to use Gemini earlier today, and I couldn't get it to generate an image for me for one reason or another. So I do think it's like very early days, and I would not be surprised if both Google and Amazon come out with very competitive offerings as the smoke starts to clear from this first inning of competition. Because, we all know Google has been working on AI for a long time, and they were sort of intentionally pumping the brakes until they realized that OpenAI was eating their lunch.
I do want to mention, and I can't remember how much I'm allowed to say about this, but I did go to Google I/O last year, and as I'm sure you can imagine, there are private conversations that take place between top executives and reporters. And so let me just say that my impression walking away from I/O was that Sundar Pichai is far more conservative in this regard in terms of pushing the envelope on AI than certainly either Sam Altman or Satya Nadella. My impression walking away from that was, what has he seen? What has he seen that's made him so cautious? And so to your point, Adam, I wonder, you see things like the Microsoft lawsuit, the lawsuit by the New York Times against Microsoft and OpenAI, and some of the issues that have come out related to DALL-E. And I don't know. I don't know if speed is the right thing here. I wonder if it's going to be a classic tortoise and the hare where the tortoise ends up being smarter and ultimately being ahead.
Well, let's stay there for a second, Todd, because I think ethics and safety and responsibility is on everyone's mind right now. And I know that you've been thinking a lot about it as a reporter. Can you talk about some of the issues that have come up around the ethical issues that you're thinking about as you start using these tools?
Certainly. There's all sorts of guidelines that different industry organizations in our field, in journalism and reporting, have come out with in terms of how to use AI and, when not to use it. And for us, it's a bit more of a gut feel. And I'll give you an example that came up a couple weeks ago, because some of this is just, on the fly. We've been covering the demise of Techstars Seattle, the startup accelerator, which Adam went through. It's funny. Adam, I in addition to the squid and Sir Mix-a-Lot, I will not bring up the interpretive dance video that I found on YouTube of your Techstars Seattle startup. Maybe Boaz can highlight that in the show notes or something. But
yeah, we'll put that in the show notes for sure.
Putting that aside, we needed an image, a sort of a generic image of Techstars Seattle. And there's this really cool spot inside the Techstars space where they would have the founders pose in front of the Techstars logo. And what I wanted was not a picture of the founders in front of the logo, but just a picture of the Techstars backdrop to illustrate a story. So I went into Adobe and used generative fill, and I created a version of that image with the Techstars logo and just the stairs, no founders. I didn't create it. Adobe did at my direction. And it was perfect. It would have been the perfect photo. And I threw it out to the group. I was like, is this okay if we disclose that it was altered with generative AI to create this image from an existing image? And it was really interesting. It's causing these sort of ethical gut checks that we never would have imagined. And Taylor Soper and John Cook, this is how we spend our Sundays, by the way, is wrestling with the ethics of AI. They pointed out, if that was our image and we disclosed it, sure. But since it was an image that Techstars took of a founder in front of the sign, it wasn't our image. So it didn't feel right. It just didn't feel right to use that image in print. And so we didn't use it.
Would you have felt the same way if you wouldn't have used AI and you would have just painted away, some things in Photoshop?
That was what was on my mind. I was even thinking, Boaz, what if the founders had been positioned below it and I just cropped it out? Would that have been different?
Exactly.
And I was debating. And so I'm not sure if that was the right answer, but it's an example of the kinds of things that we're wrestling with. And in the end, right now, I don't think there are any right answers. I mean, there are some right answers, but there's a lot of gray area in there.
What do you think about that, Adam? Are you thinking about some ethical issues as related to content creation?
I mean, well, marketing in general, of course, but just I feel like there's so many different layers of this onion, right? Marketing is very different than journalism, right? Like, you guys have a whole code of conduct, and I feel like marketers tend to be a little more freewheeling. But good marketing, if you believe in the Seth Godin school of marketing, there's no good marketing that doesn't have a foundation in trust and consent, and that isn't somewhat transparent. Not to say that everyone in my field abides, but there's all kinds of blurry areas when you start using AI for marketing. And I think some of it matters and some of it not so much. Like, if you use AI as a writing assistant to help you with a blog post, I suppose there's an ethical concern with job displacement and, should I have hired a human being to do this instead of a computer? But the reality is that my clients don't want to pay to hire another human being to write that blog post. The alternative would be no blog post. So that to me is like a lesser concern than things like transparency and privacy and making sure that you're like treating customers the way they expect to be treated, sort of following the golden rule. And, there's just so many things, right? Like, there's so many different ethical concerns. You could argue there's an environmental concern because of all of this, GPU power that's being pumped into generating 8 million Dolly images that you may or may not ever use. That costs electricity. Not to mention the legal issue, like, liability and data protection. And, you can ask some of these tools to give you a customer list, and it's not really clear where those names are coming from sometimes. Like, who's scraping the web to get all of that? And are the people that end up in your spreadsheet okay with being in your spreadsheet? So I do have some concerns, but the way I'm using it, I feel like it is at the moment somewhat benign. Read this blog post, tell me what it says, help me create provocative, interesting social media posts, take this story, create an image for the story, because I'm a terrible artist and I couldn't do it myself. Like, I have no ethical qualms with generating a fake image for a story as long as it doesn't misrepresent the thing that I'm trying to say. And I suppose I should, you need to credit it appropriately.
I think this is a good opportunity to, sorry, Todd, you were going to.
Just real quick, I wanted to add on to that. Adam, that brings up a really interesting other ethical dilemma that we ran into. And recently we decided when we're generating images to go with stories, we will not use photorealistic images. We'll use things that are clearly illustrations created by the AI generator, because otherwise there would cause this confusion. So again, we're coming up with these things on the fly, things that feel right based on our underlying principles.
And now, before we dive deeper, I want to take a quick moment and tell you a little bit about one of our podcast partners. As a listener of this show, I know you're trying to stay on top of all things AI and tech, which is why you have to check out the amazing Geekwire podcast, produced by Geekwire and hosted by Todd Bishop. It's a treasure of insights featuring industry leaders and the latest tech trends that are shaping our world, and the perfect companion podcast to shift AI. Geekwire podcast is where technology meets curiosity and covers the world of technology, startups, and geek culture. Expand your tech horizons and join the conversation. Tune into the Geekwire podcast today, a perfect complement to our own discussions here. Don't miss out. Follow the Geekwire podcast on Apple Podcast, Spotify, or your favorite listening app. Now back to the episode. Well, I was going to say, Adam, that now might be a good time to kind of go back in time and talk about your marketing genius when you were starting Haiku Deck and the Sir Mix-a-Lot story. We kind of queued it up at the beginning, so we might as well tell it now. But I think it's interesting to think about those times and kind of some of the stuff that you would do to create interest in the projects you were working on compared, where we are now, which is 10 or 15 years later. Can you maybe tell the audience first about the Sir Mix-a-Lot story and then maybe kind of contrast the way that you were thinking about marketing back then?
Absolutely. So before Haiku Deck was a mobile productivity company that was taking on PowerPoint and the presentation industry, we started out as a celebrity-based Facebook game studio. So my co-founder, Kevin, and another co-founder, Kyle, had this idea initially. It wasn't my idea. I joined them kind of late in the game. And it was at a time when casual games were making like a lot of headway on social media. Farmville is something you might remember. A lot of people were playing Farmville back then. And so we thought, what would it look like if we partnered with celebrities, made games about the celebrities, had prizes involving the celebrities, and then we worked with the celebrities to drive their fans into the game. So the whole marketing strategy was get a good celebrity that had passionate fans that wanted to play a game about them. And we made a bunch of mistakes along the way. I appreciate the kind words about my marketing genius, but there's a lot more examples of marketing failure than genius in this part of my career, because ultimately we had trouble finding any celebrity that would want to work with us. And Sir Mix-a-Lot is a local guy here in Seattle, and he's interested in technology and graciously decided he would partner with us on this project, even though we had no money to pay him up front. We built an awesome game. Kyle Kesterson is a talented illustrator. Kevin is a very talented developer. A couple other talented developers. We made a good game. But at the end of the day, we launched the game, and we learned after we built the game that actually Sir Mix-a-Lot's fans weren't really that interested in casual games. He caters to a different demographic. And we might have been better off if Justin Bieber or Kim Kardashian was our celebrity or not. I mean, in the end, celebrity-based games never really happened. There's been only a couple of celebrities that have launched successful games, and ours failed, like dead on arrival, which is very sad. And I think in retrospect, what I learned is I definitely could have figured out that Sir Mix-a-Lot fans didn't want to play a Sir Mix-a-Lot game, no matter how good it was, before even building the game. And I think in the age of AI, there's a lot less friction to doing that research. You can use tools to identify who the fans are. You can use tools to create surveys and run surveys and analyze those surveys to understand if you are about to build the wrong thing before you even write a line of code. And that would have saved us, probably $250,000 in our investors' money. Just sad. That's one example of how we live in a different world. I think as the one marketing guy on the team back then, I could have focused a lot less on how I was going to launch this game and a lot more on should I bother launching this game.
But it brings up a good point, though, because you still have to be a good marketer in the age of AI. You still have to do the proper testing. Yes. You still have to have a lot of intuition. And so, I think that's just a good lesson.
Yeah, and I think for me, AI is an assistant. It's a boost. I'm not sure if it's a 20% boost or a 40% boost, but it's a boost. Yeah. And if you think of it like, oh, this is going to get my job done, you'll be mistaken, right? And you can put a lot of garbage into the world if you think that AI is going to get the job done soup to nuts. But it might turbo boost your efforts.
I'm going to jump to another topic, Todd, and I want you to start. We recently had Joe Wynn on the show talking about some regulatory stuff, and they just got out of a short session in Olympia. When you think about regulatory frameworks and what's going to be happening in the next 2 or 3 years, what comes to mind? I know, we've had facial recognition come through the Senate here in the state of Washington. We now have a task force that the governor is going to get ready to sign. What are some of the things that are on your mind as you look at that landscape politically?
Absolutely. First off, I thought that Joe Wynn episode was fantastic, Boaz. Just the way that he's pushing the envelope in terms of using AI. If people haven't heard that episode of Shift AI, I highly recommend it. I learned a lot and frankly was emboldened by what he said to if this guy's doing this in the middle of the state legislature although the fact that he had to sort of get buy-in from his counterparts just to use Calendly, that gives you a sense for the conservative nature. Anyway, the tension between the states proceeding with all sorts of legislation at the local level, effectively, 50 localities, and the stagnation at the federal level on any of these issues is really interesting to me. Just how dispersed the policy has become. I think Washington State and California are in the driver's seat from what I've heard talking with people. If people are lobbying on these issues at all, effectively they don't go to Washington, D.C., they go to Sacramento and Olympia. And I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing. And of course, that does put the Washington State Legislature in an interesting spot because they've got Microsoft and Amazon in their backyard, two of the key companies that are, creating these technologies. I'm not sure if that's a good thing or not, though. It feels like there would be some efficiencies to be had if the U.S. Congress could figure this out and push this forward. And frankly, I think it's obviously we're talking about many different issues, some of them relevant in the upcoming presidential election, but this feels like it should be top of the agenda, and it's not. It's not.
I know. Yeah. Adam, do you have any thoughts on the regulatory issues or policy or misinformation?
Yeah, I mean, our government at all levels is doing a poor job of keeping up with technology across the board, and that is going to have far-reaching impacts, I think, for generations, as this AI train leaves the station at high speeds. So I am not optimistic that the government will help us. I think that it's going to have to be responsible tech leaders. And that also makes me very nervous because I know that there's a lot of discord between, Sundar on one side of the spectrum, perhaps, and Elon Musk on the other side. I'm not sure it's going to end well.
Yeah. Well, I'm going
to your point earlier, Todd, about I don't know what Sundar has seen. It might just be that he's seen the Terminator trilogy.
And he doesn't like what he's seen. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Adam and Todd, I end these episodes the same every single time, talking about the future of work, the future of AI. And so I'm going to do the same thing that I do for everybody, but you guys each get a chance to answer. 2 words only to describe the future of work, future of AI. Then you can elaborate. And Adam, you get to go first.
I only get 2 words. I can't say anything in 2 words. 2 words. Guarded optimism.
Okay, guarded optimism.
Is that specific enough?
Yeah, that is. You want to elaborate a little bit before Todd weighs in?
Well, I think that in general, what I've seen in my career in tech has been steady progress, mostly for good. And I think that the people that I've worked with have good intentions. And so occasionally in the course of being competitive, things get out of hand. And then usually the government steps in too late. I'm hoping that just as we've seen in the first year and a half of general availability of LLMs, that the promise will be elusive compared to the reality. And hopefully we'll have time as an industry to course correct as we get closer to this, this idea of more sophisticated models.
Yeah. Guarded optimism. I like it. Todd?
I'm going to go on the total,
What are your 2 words?
Total opposite end of the spectrum. The things that have happened in the last 18 months have been so fast. I realize that I'm elaborating before I'm giving you my 2 words. So my 2 words, Boaz, are hyperdrive. I think that things are going to just accelerate and continue accelerating. I've never seen, I guess I don't mean to sound like the old person, but I've been covering tech since 2002. So more than 2 decades. I've never seen a year like this, ever. And, I missed the dot-com bubble. I didn't get to see that. And I feel like this has made up for it in some respects. I just feel like it's going to accelerate so fast that the only thing that's going to slow us down is a backlash. And then I know you focus a lot on remote work, Boaz, and I've been talking just recently with some startups that have been meeting in person to the point of a backlash, like 5 days a week. They're in the office in person.
Yeah, I've heard about that too, actually. That's interesting.
It's a small micro trend. I don't think it's going to become the big thing, but I think the kind of guarded optimism that Adam is talking about is going to come more as like a counter to the hyperdrive that we're going to see just going forward. And I guess just hang on. Those would be my other two words.
Yeah. Hold tight. Well, this has been an amazing episode, and I think that I feel like we need to come and revisit this maybe in another 6 months. And there's probably a million things that are going to happen between now and then if you guys are both right, and we can come and do this again. So I really appreciate you guys being on the Shift AI podcast. Todd, thank you. Adam, thank you. And would love to have you again.
Anytime, Boaz. And next time I do want to talk about my first job. So if you have us back, I need to talk about schlepping olives in Orland, California, if you don't mind.
Absolutely. We'll definitely.
Well, if we're going to do that, I want to talk about sweeping cigarette butts in the Hyannis Regency parking area.
Oh, well, you guys, we might have to kind of come back and do that really quick right now. So Adam, you've piqued my interest. I'm sorry. I need to hear about sweeping butts. So Adam, what was the first job that you've ever had where you got paid for a living?
When I was 12 years old, my dad made me get a summer job. And the only one I could find was at the Hyannis Regency, which is not the Hyatt Regency.
The Hyannis.
Hyannis Regency on Cape Cod, where I'm from. And I walked around wearing a V1 Walkman over one ear because they were afraid I was going to get hit by a car. And I had to sweep up the cigarette butts. And to this day, I have a really hard time when I see people throw their cigarette butts on the ground. It triggers me.
Was your V1 Walkman yellow by any chance?
No, that was my
black?
V2.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
But I still remember the little spongy orange headphones.
All right, Todd, what was your first job where you actually got paid?
I worked at Musco Olive in my hometown of Orland, California in the summertime in between my freshman and sophomore years of college. And I'll never forget it. It was the thing that convinced me to stick with college because it was not for me. This is an olive processing plant, and I would clean the lines at the end of the day. Smelled like, sort of, I don't know how to describe an olive smell other than it's just like the harshest vinegar you've ever smelled. And it's funny because I'm actually in my hometown right now visiting my mom for the week, and you go by the Musco plant and it's like, it actually brings back these really good memories for me. So that was my first job. And I do love olives.
How did you get that job?
I knew the plant manager who was the dad of somebody I played tennis with. It's all about connections. It's all about connections.
It's all, yeah. It's all, even in a small town, it's all about connections.
Even more so.
Well, guys, thank you so much. We'll definitely have you back on again. I appreciate the time and this exciting times.
Thank you, Boaz.
Thanks, Boaz.
That's a wrap. Thanks for tuning in. Such a pleasure to have Todd and Adam as our guests on today's episode. Todd and Adam bring a special perspective on how technology like AI is changing the landscape for startups and enterprise companies in the Pacific Northwest and beyond. If you want to stay connected to Todd and Adam, you can find them on LinkedIn. And if you're interested in how they think about emerging technology, definitely connect with them and keep up with their posts and activities online. I continue to be amazed by the guests we've had on the show, and I'm excited about the ones joining us in the near future. I truly appreciate you spending your time with us. Thank you for listening to this episode. Don't forget to subscribe to the Shift AI podcast for more exciting interviews and to the Simply AI weekly newsletter for updates on how AI can help you scale your business. The Shift AI podcast is syndicated by Geekwire, and we are grateful to have the show sponsored by Simply Augmented. Our theme music was created by Dave Angel.